There's a country in Southeast Asia that has no coastline, no oil, no gold, no army that anyone ever counted. Its people numbered 2.5 million. And yet, between 1964 and 1973, the United States of America dropped more than 5 million tons of bombs on it. More than the Allies dropped on Japan in the entire Second World War. More ordnance in a single war on a single country than anywhere in the history of the earth. And for almost 40 years, the official answer in Washington was simple. There was no war. There was no war in Laos. In the last video, we watched America lose Vietnam. But right next door on the other side of the mountains, in a country most of the world had never heard of, another war was happening. No declaration, no flags, no vote in Congress, no name. A war run by the CIA, flown by an airline that did not exist on any timetable, fought by mountain people who had never been asked to fight, and bombed by the largest aircraft ever built. This is the story of the secret war in Laos, the most bombed country on Earth, Laos. The name comes from a Lao phrase that means land of a million elephants. It is a country of karst mountains, limestone towers, and one great river, the Mekong. In a valley in Xayaburi province, there is a place called the Plain of Jars. Thousands of stone containers, some taller than a man, more than 2,000 years old. What they were for, archaeologists still argue about. In 2019, UNESCO put the valley on its World Heritage List. Less than 100 kilometers away, in a district called Phon Savan, the ground is a mosaic of craters. Craters in every field, craters in every meadow. That is what 9 years of American bombing left behind. When France lost Indochina in 1954, the world drew a new line on the map. The Geneva Conference agreed. Laos would be neutral, a buffer state between the communist world and the free one. No foreign troops, no bases, no sides. On paper, a small country that had finally got its peace. The United States never signed the 1962 agreements. Washington took note. In Washington, taking note means exactly one thing. When we decide to act, we will act. And inside Laos, the war had already started. 3 forces were fighting for the country. In the middle, the Royal Lao government, led by Prince Suvarnabhuma, a man who spoke 4 languages, a Buddhist who wanted no war, the only person in the country everyone respected. He was born in 1901, the son of a king. The kings of Luang Prabang had ruled the valleys for centuries. Suvarna was royal by blood and a man of the people by choice. To his right, Boon, a general with no popular base, but with friends in Bangkok and in the CIA. To his left, the Pathet Lao, the communist Lao people, backed by Hanoi and Moscow. Suvarna tried to hold the middle. He failed. In 1958, Boon staged a coup. The coup came in the dead of night. Boon men took the radio station and the barracks in Vientiane. Suvarna was not in the capital, he was in the villages, and the whole country watched to see who was on which side. Within 2 days, the Americans were talking to Boon. This is the moment the secret war begins. Not with a declaration, not with a vote, with a cable, a radio message, a check. The years that followed were a standing crisis. Coalition governments that fell, ceasefires that never held, and money flowing from Bangkok and from Washington into every camp. In the end, everyone in Laos needed America. Everyone. In Bangkok, the CIA set up a secret program. It had a number, not a name. 8420. Inside it, officers, translators, money, weapons, and an American officer named Robert Knaus. His job was simple. Find an army where no army existed. Knaus looked at the maps, the mountains, the statistics, and he found his army. In the highlands of northwestern Laos lived the Hmong, 250,000 people, farmers, animists. For generations, they had lived in villages on the cliffs, above the valleys. No government ever bothered with them. No army, no infrastructure, no state. Just people and villages and a way of life that was 1,000 years old. The CIA wanted the mountains, and the Hmong had the mountains, and nothing else the CIA needed. Just people. In 1958, a chieftain named Vang Pao, 43 years old from a clan that had lived in those mountains for generations, sat down with an American officer for the first time. Vang Pao was the son of a chieftain's house. He had traveled down to the lowlands, learned to read, spoken French, rare among the highlanders. But to the people in the valley, he was still a man of the village. And that, it turned out, was exactly what the CIA wanted. What the CIA offered him was everything: weapons, radio, food, money, education for his children, a clinic, a school. All it wanted was his men. The first thing the CIA delivered was not a gun, but a radio. Vang Pao put it in a hut in his village and called it his own station. The Hmong had never heard their own language on the air. Vang Pao said yes. Within 5 years, he had built the largest irregular force in Southeast Asia. 3,000 commandos, then 10,000. Then, at its peak, more than 300,000 Hmong, soldiers, fighters, porters, cooks, all under American direction. And the CIA built more than an army. It built a parallel world, a radio station that broadcast in a language no one had ever put on the air. Schools, hospitals, roads, a state inside a state, a Hmong country that existed on the map only in the files of the CIA. The Royal Lao government gave Vang Pao a rank no Hmong had ever held, Major General. And in the mountains, a new kind of soldier was born, the Hmong Commando. The knife in the CIA's hand, light, fast, knowing every path and every cave. The CIA organized the Hmong into commando units, groups of about 200 men who could live off the land and move faster than any regular army. The commandos had no permanent base. Their base was the mountain. For the next 17 years, wherever the commandos went, the war went with them. The Hmong kept their own calendar. The new year was called Pij Nyem Hab. The whole village gathered. The women wore their best embroidered clothes, and they remembered the dead. The CIA had radios, guns, and money. The Hmong kept the calendar. When the operation was finally exposed, the head of the CIA, William Colby, had to answer questions in Congress. In essence, he said, yes, in Laos we created, in effect, a state within a state, an army, a government, a nation, and then we closed the door and left. He would return to that word, state, many times, because states don't disappear. People do. You can't run a war without an airline. So the CIA started one, Air America. Its first planes took off from China in 1946 to fly American personnel out as the communists won. In the 1950s, the airline moved to Thailand and Laos. Its aircraft carried no national markings, only the red star of Air America, a star that appeared on no flag in the world. If you were shot down over Laos, officially, you were not an American pilot. Officially, you did not exist. At first, it flew C-47s, the workhorses of the Second World War, carrying officers, weapons, and food into the mountains. Then the C-123 Provider, a transport plane that was also a gunship, its nose full of machine guns, the workhorse of the airlift. Then came the strangest plane in the history of this war, the B-26 Invader, a Second World War bomber that had already been retired to museum hangars. The CIA bought dozens of them, stripped the armor, removed the crew seats, kept one gunner, and turned a 40-year-old fighter into the fastest, lightest bomber of the Cold War. The B-26s flew low over the mountains at 400 kilometers an hour, dropping 2,000-pound bombs on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and on North Vietnamese supply columns. In a single day, Air America could drop more ordnance than a fighter bomber squadron. In a month, more than an army. And at night, there was a helicopter called the Puck, the Piasecki H-21, the largest helicopter of its time, with a cabin wide enough to land 40 commandos. In the dark, a Puck would appear over a village, the side door would open, and the Hmong commandos would go out into the forest. In the morning, the helicopter would come back. The village would be on fire. The pilots of Air America were often veterans of the Second World War in Korea. They were paid 30 to 50% more than their military salaries. The crash rate was high. The mountains of Laos did not care about an airline's timetable. Every pilot knew the arithmetic of this war. If he made it through, he would be rich. If he didn't, well, the insurance was modest. The rules were simple. No insignia, no name on the fuselage. The CIA denied everything, including, when it came to it, its own dead. For the first time in history, an airline was a cover for an intelligence agency, and an intelligence agency was running a war. And in America, nobody knew. The year is 1964. In the mountains, the Pathet Lao is taking more and more territory. In the jungle, a road system is becoming a road of strategic importance, the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Thousands of kilometers of paths cut through the forest, along which North Vietnam moved soldiers and supplies into the south. The bulk of the trail, up to 80%, ran through Laos, through neutral, non-existent Laos. On March 6, 1964, 5 months before the Gulf of Tonkin, 5 months before the world learned about the escalation in Vietnam, the first B-52 lifts off from a base in Thailand. Operation Barrel Roll has begun. The B-52 Stratofortress, a wingspan of 45 meters, 8 engines, a bomb bay that can swallow a room, up to 70,000 pounds of ordnance on board. The crews called it the Super Fort. At the time, the largest military aircraft in the world. The crews flew from bases in Thailand, over the Mekong, at high altitude. Below in the valleys, the craters opened up like wounds. The navigators flew the same corridor, the same forest, the same mountains, for months on end. The B-52 does not aim at targets. It aims at sections of forest, and instead of bombs, it drops Rocky, the B-44, a 500-pound canister that, at 3,000 feet, opens up and scatters 750 bomblets across an area the size of 2 football fields. One B-52 could drop about 15 of them in a single pass. A flight of 60 B-52s, thousands of them in an hour. In 1965, the Americans tested on the trail a bomb with a plastic casing, 15,000 pounds, called the Daisy Cutter, the largest unguided bomb of its era. It was not designed to kill a target. It was designed to destroy the road. For 9 years, the sky over Laos was full of them. By the most commonly cited estimate, for most of the war, a bomb fell somewhere in Laos roughly every 8 seconds. On March 10, 1972, the United States flew the single heaviest bombing day in history, more than 2,000 B-52 sorties in one day. That was the peak. North Vietnam was moving the heaviest equipment of the war through the trail, and the B-52s came every day, day after day, until the trail simply went around the craters. The total? More than 5 million tons of ordnance. Of that, more than 2.5 billion cluster submunitions. An estimated 2 to 5% of them never exploded. That means somewhere between 50 and 130 million live bombs are still in the soil of Laos, in the rivers, in the fields, in the forests. And the target of all of this was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. For 9 years, America bombed the trail into the ground, and the trail survived. North Vietnam simply rebuilt it, dug detours around the craters, and at the height of the war, had more troops in neutral Laos than in South Vietnam itself. The most bombed country on earth did not exist on the map. The world learned about it by the sound. Beneath the bombs in the mountains, the Hmong were fighting. They had started as Vang Pao's commandos in 1958. By 1965, they were a full army. The Hmong fought in every theater of the secret war. The southern jungle, the eastern jungle along the Cambodian border, the mountains of the north. They were outgunned, outnumbered, outsupplied. But they knew the land. The Americans did not. The commandos fought in small groups, on ridges and in caves. They had no tanks, no artillery. What they had was terrain and knowledge. Which ridge could be held, which river could be crossed, which village would shelter them. The most famous battle of the secret war took place at Long Giang in 1971. The locals called it the Khe Sanh of the Highlands. 20,000 North Vietnamese and Pathet Lao troops closed in on a valley where the Hmong were holding out. For weeks, Vang Pao's men held the ground by a thread. The Americans dropped bombs, Air America carried in supplies, and the Hmong fought. In the end, the valley was defended, but the price of victory was measured in thousands. Over 17 years, an estimated 30,000 to 50,000 Hmong died. The CIA had no list. The Pentagon had no report. There were no mass graves. The mountains took them. But there was a record of another kind. The Hmong remembered. The CIA had promised them everything. Protection, a homeland, recognition. If America fights, America is with us. That is what the Hmong believed. And when America left in 1973, the Hmong learned what the word alliance really meant. The Paris Peace Accords ended American involvement in all of Indochina. The money stopped. The planes stopped. The CIA's message to Vang Pao was short. The war is over. Go home. Vang Pao had no home. In 1975, the Pathet Lao took Vientiane. And in the mountains, the Hmong state, the state inside a state, began to disappear. The Pathet Lao understood one thing. The Hmong who fought for America were the Hmong who knew the most. They knew the CIA bases, the caches, the paths, the names. So the policy of the new government in 1975 to 76 was simple. Hmong who had served were criminals. Villages were searched, men were taken. Re-education camps, where the Hmong, witnesses said, were killed by the thousands. In April 1975, the last American planes left. Operation Baby Lift lifted more than 3,000 children out of Saigon, among them a handful of Hmong children. They were the first of their clans to leave, and most of them did not know where they were going. Some of the Hmong fled to Cambodia, and there, in 1977, they found the Khmer Rouge, which had decided that the Hmong were a fifth column. The Khmer Rouge massacred the Hmong camps along the border, one of the worst massacres of that war. Vang Pao held out in the mountains until 1978. With his men, and with tens of thousands of Hmong civilians, women, children, the old, he moved south toward the Thai border. An exodus through jungle, over mountains, across rivers. Thousands died on the road. Bombs, disease, hunger, the Pathet Lao behind them. In 1978, at the Thai border, Vang Pao laid down his weapons. With him, about 12,000 Hmong. He learned that the Americans had already decided his fate. The door was closed. The door had been closed for 4 years. Only in 1979, under pressure from Congress and from the Hmong diaspora, did the Carter administration agree to let about 10,000 Hmong into the United States, a small fraction of those who had asked. In 1992, President George Bush signed a proclamation in which the United States officially recognized the Hmong veterans as honorary allies. In 1998, in Minneapolis, the first Hmong Veterans Memorial was unveiled, 25 years after the war ended, on foreign soil. The Hmong in America built their own communities, temples, associations, a Veterans Day. The war the United States refused to name was, for them, the war that named them. Today, the largest Hmong community in the world lives in the United States, Minneapolis, Fresno, Sacramento. More than 250,000 people. Their children speak English with American accents. Their grandfathers remember the mountains. Vang Pao died in 2011 in a nursing home in Fresno, California, 95 years old. In his last interviews, he kept coming back to the same question. Not, why did the Americans abandon us? He wasn't asking why. He was asking, where is America? He had answered it himself a long time ago. He was American. Laos today is a country of about 7.5 million people. Tourist trails, Buddhist stupas, the river, the mountains, the fields. And under every field, 2.5 billion pieces of metal that were supposed to explode 50 years ago, and didn't. In the district of Phon Savin, the ground is a mosaic of craters. A child playing in a meadow can pick up something that takes off his leg. Farmers plow with a bomb detector instead of an ox. The river runs dry in the summer, and in the riverbed, among the stones, the canisters of the Rocky lie. Since 1975, unexploded ordnance has killed or maimed at least 20,000 more people, mostly children, mostly farmers. The count has not stopped. Official records show dozens of victims every year. The war that ended in 1973 is still killing. Demining teams have been working since the mid-1990s. The Lao government, with the help of the United States and the UN, in more than 25 years, less than 1/10 of the most contaminated land has been cleared. By some estimates, at the current pace, it will take 100 years to clear all the bombs. The deminers work in shifts, with detectors and shovels. A single canister, half buried in a rice paddy, can take a day to remove. The field takes a generation. In 2009, the American Secretary of State Hillary Clinton visited Vientiane and went to the National Museum of Unexploded Ordnance. She spoke to Laotian families who had lost children to the bombs. And in the name of the American people, she said, "We are sorry for the harm and pain we have caused." 40 years after the bombing stopped, 20 years after the Hmong were officially recognized. 40 years in which the official answer in Washington was, there was no war. There are wars with flags, and there are wars without flags. The second kind is more dangerous. You cannot protest a war you don't know about. You cannot vote on a war that is not on the map. You cannot ask a question about a war that never happened. The bombs of Laos are still there. And while they are there, the war is not over.